The perfume was my mistake. 10 years of running. 10 years of hiding. 10 years of becoming someone else, and I kept the one thing that could destroy me. The moment Luca De Luca inhaled at that gala, I knew I was already dead. But let me start at the beginning. The real beginning. The night I should have listened to every instinct screaming at me to stay invisible. The Belrose Foundation Gala was too bright, too loud, too exposed. A ballroom coated in gold and ego, chandeliers glittering like constellations built for people who believed they belonged among them. I wasn't supposed to be on the floor at all. My booth, my sanctuary, was tucked behind layers of velvet fabric where clients approached me one at a time to request custom fragrance blends. Quiet. Controlled. Predictable. But the event coordinator had begged me to deliver one of my creations personally to a VIP donor. Elena, please, just this once. He's very particular about who approaches him. Elena. The name that wasn't mine but had become mine over 10 years of careful construction. I'd made the mistake of saying yes. Now I slipped through the ballroom, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. My heels clicked softly on the marble, each step a reminder that my legs weren't as steady as they needed to be. My fingers curled protectively around the velvet pouch containing the fragrance, a delicate scent I had crafted earlier that afternoon. A harmless task. A simple delivery. Except nothing was ever simple when your past had teeth. You're doing fine, I whispered to myself. Just deliver it and leave. The orchestra played something airy and beautiful, but it only made my pulse race as if each note were a countdown. There were too many memories clinging to the edges of this kind of luxury. Too many ghosts hiding in crystal reflections and polished floors. A waiter passed, balancing champagne flutes. Miss? Would you care for? No, thank you. I smiled without showing teeth. Without making an impression. Invisible. That was the goal. Always invisible. As I crossed the center of the ballroom, weaving between servers and donors, I inhaled the familiar haze of perfume, cologne, champagne, and money. And then, a scent cut through everything, devastating in its precision. Sandalwood. Italian bergamot. A faint metallic whisper beneath it. The world stopped. Not metaphorically, physically. My feet froze mid-step. My breath lodged itself in the tight cage of my chest. My fingers went numb around the pouch. Not that scent. Not here. Not in this life. My throat tightened around a gasp I didn't dare release. My vision dimmed at the edges, not from panic but from memory. A memory I'd shoved so deeply into myself it shouldn't have been able to climb out. That cologne belonged to one person. Only one. A ghost I'd spent 10 years burying. Keep moving, I commanded myself. Do not stop. Do not look. I forced myself forward, every step shaky and mechanical. I couldn't look around. I couldn't search the room. If I did, if I confirmed what my senses were screaming, I would fall apart right here on the marble floor. Elena. The coordinator hissed from behind me. Don't stop now. Table 7 straight ahead. Right. Elena Rivera. The mask I'd sculpted so carefully. I nodded, focusing on the table ahead. I set the velvet pouch down with hands that weren't steady, breathing in jerky fragments as if my lungs had forgotten how to work. Just leave. Just walk away. Do not look back. And then I heard it. Grazie. His voice. A breath. A vibration. A memory sharpened into sound. My vision blurred. My hand tightened around the edge of the table to stay upright. That voice had once been the safest place I'd ever known. And the most dangerous. Luca De Luca. Here. In this room. A universe away from where he should have been. Sir, is the fragrance to your satisfaction? The coordinator's voice sounded distant, underwater. Very much. His response was smooth, cultured. Who created this? My heart stopped. Oh, that would be Elena Rivera, our resident perfumer. She's just, Elena? I felt his presence before I saw him. An energy that sliced through the crowd, an awareness that prickled down my spine. I should have been nothing to him now. A stranger. A shadow. A dead girl wearing a borrowed face. But I knew Luca's instincts. And his instincts were lethal. I forced myself to move, slipping into the flow of bodies, praying the crowd would swallow me whole. For 5 steps I believed I might escape. Then I heard him inhale. A soft sound, barely audible over the music. But to me it was thunder. Because he wasn't inhaling the room, he was inhaling me. The perfume I wore. My perfume. The scent I created at 17. The one thing I hadn't been able to abandon when I abandoned my entire life. Stupid. Reckless. Fatal. Miss. A server blocked my path. Are you all right? You look pale. Fine. Excuse me. I sidestepped him, walking faster now, my pulse pounding in my ears. The floral arrangement near the exit offered brief cover. I ducked behind it and slipped into the hallway, the music fading behind me. But the echo of his voice followed. Where did you get that perfume? My vision blurred. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. His tone wasn't angry. It was worse. Recognition dipped in disbelief. Dove al Hai Trovato? Where did you find it? Italian. Naples dialect. My mother tongue. The language of secrets whispered on rooftops with him beside me. My heart twisted painfully. I fled down the hallway through the service door into the dim corridor leading to my booth. My hands were shaking so violently that it took 3 tries to get the curtain closed behind me. My knees nearly buckled. He was alive. He was here. And he had recognized the only part of Aria Moretti I hadn't managed to kill. I grabbed my bag, my coat, and anything I could reach. My thoughts collided violently. Escape plans, panic, disbelief, grief I thought I'd outlived. I shoved everything into my arms and forced myself out the back exit. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I sprinted toward the elevator for the parking garage. I jabbed the button repeatedly, praying it would open before. The doors slid open. And he was inside. Luca. Older. Sharper. Every inch of him was carved from the life he stepped into after mine was stolen away. His eyes lifted, locking onto me with a kind of slow, devastating certainty, as if he were staring at a ghost that refused to stay buried. He stepped forward once. Just once. I stepped back. You, he murmured, voice low enough to bruise, were wearing her perfume. My stomach twisted so hard I felt sick. Her. Aria. He still spoke of her like she'd been real. Like she hadn't been a girl who died. Like I wasn't standing right here in front of him. Rebuilt, renamed, and still hopelessly vulnerable to the man who had destroyed me without ever meaning to. His gaze sharpened, hunter's focus. And he whispered, "Who are you?" I turned and ran. I didn't stop running until my heels skidded across the pavement of the parking garage. My breath came out in ragged, uneven bursts, each one full of that scent. His scent, still clinging to the inside of my lungs like smoke from a fire 10 years old. I fumbled with my keys, my hands trembling so badly I dropped them twice before I managed to unlock the car. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut and locked it, my chest heaving. Don't look back. Don't look at him. Don't remember. I forced my shaking fingers around the steering wheel, gripping it hard enough for pain to shoot up my arms. Pain was grounding. Pain was good. Pain reminded me I wasn't 19 anymore. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't trapped in a burning car while the world shattered around me. You're Elena. You're not Aria. He can't know who you are. My phone buzzed in my purse. A sharp, intrusive vibration that nearly made me scream. I dug it out with clumsy hands. A message from the gala coordinator. Everything okay? Did you leave early? I stared at the screen for a long second, then typed. Not feeling well. Heading home. I wasn't heading home. Going home would be suicide. Not when Luca De Luca had looked at me tonight like he'd glimpsed the outline of a ghost he wasn't ready to admit existed. I started the engine and backed out, navigating the ramps with a steadiness I didn't feel. My hands remembered how to drive even when my mind felt like cracked glass full of memories I could no longer keep from spilling. He didn't know my face, I whispered to the empty car. He didn't know my voice. He shouldn't have known anything. Except he did. The perfume. My one mistake. My one indulgence. My one memory I refused to bury because it was the last fragment of a girl I failed to protect. My chest tightened painfully. I shouldn't have brought it tonight. I should have worn something generic. Something forgettable. Something safe. But the bottle had been sitting on my dresser and I'd touched it out of habit before leaving for the gala. The way you feel an heirloom from a life you pretend didn't exist. Stupid, I hissed at my reflection. So incredibly stupid. At the exit gate I swiped my card, drove out into the cold night and kept driving. Not toward my apartment. Not toward anywhere familiar. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed distance between me and the man whose life was once tangled with mine in ways that should have been impossible to forget. 15 minutes passed before my mind began to steady. 20 minutes before my vision cleared enough to notice headlights behind me. Too close, too steady, too synchronized with every turn I made. My stomach dropped. I changed lanes. The car changed lanes. I turned down a side street. It followed. The air left my lungs in a long icy stream. Of course, I breathed. Of course he wouldn't let me go. Of course he wouldn't walk away after inhaling a ghost he'd spent a decade mourning. I pressed the gas, not enough to draw attention but enough to create space. The car behind me stayed close. Not aggressively. Not threateningly. Just watching. I recognized the model. Not common. Not cheap. The kind his men used for surveillance. He always preferred black vehicles. Sleek, discreet, expensive, armored. Think, I ordered myself. Stop panicking and think. I took another left. The car followed. My palms began to sweat. Wasn't Luca driving? I knew that instinctively. He wouldn't tail me himself. He'd watch from a distance, gather information, ask the right questions, pull the right strings. That was how he moved. Quiet, controlled, invisible until the moment he wanted to be seen. But these men, his men, they didn't hesitate. My mind raced. He didn't recognize me, not entirely. Not yet. But he recognized enough to be dangerous. If he finds my apartment tonight, I swallowed hard. If he learns my real name, if he uncovers even a single piece of the truth, my entire new life would burn before morning. I took a deep breath and forced myself to do what I'd trained myself to do years ago. Think logically. Move methodically. Don't panic. Panic kills. I turned suddenly into a crowded gas station. The car behind me slowed, hesitated, then passed by without pulling in. I exhaled shakily. Not gone. Never gone. But temporarily out of view. I parked at the far pump. Put the nozzle in the tank even though I had almost a full tank of gas and kept my head down. That was the rule. When you're being hunted you don't move like prey. Prey runs. Survivors strategize. The gas ticked slowly, too slowly, nerves scratching at my skin. I kept my eyes on my shoes, on the pavement, on anything except the road behind me. A man walked past, keys jangling. Cold night. Yes. I didn't look up. When the tank hit full, I placed the nozzle back in its cradle, slid into the driver's seat and checked the mirrors. No black cars. No headlights creeping up behind me. Still not safe. I drove again. This time not randomly. My body knew the route even before my mind processed where I was going. Anice's apartment. She would know what to do. He always knew. She'd saved me once before when I'd been on the run with a burned passport and a shattered identity, dragged halfway across the world by the remnants of grief that refused to die. I pulled into the underground garage of her building, parked crookedly and rushed toward the elevator. The doors closed around me. My reflection stared back, pale, wide-eyed, breathing too fast. I pressed my palms to the metal walls and whispered the truth to myself, the one I'd tried so hard to bury. He's alive. And he recognized me. The elevator doors opened. And Annie stood waiting. Her expression tightened the moment she saw my face. You ran into your past, she said quietly. I nodded. She stepped forward, took my hands and squeezed. Then everything changes tonight. And just like that, the world I'd built began to crumble. Annie didn't ask questions. She turned, her silk scarf fluttering behind her, and guided me down the hallway with the urgency of someone who already understood the stakes. Her apartment door clicked shut the moment we stepped inside, and she locked all 3 deadbolts with sharp, efficient twists. Only then did she look at me thoroughly. You encountered him. Not a question. I sank onto her velvet sofa, my hands trembling uncontrollably. He was at the gala. I didn't see him until it was too late. He smelled me, Anais. Her eyes, usually soft with age, sharpened. That perfume again. I know. My voice cracked. I know. I should have changed it. I should have buried it years ago. But it was the one thing The one thing you kept from your past, she finished gently. But nostalgia is dangerous medicine, child. She only called me that when I was unraveling. I leaned back into the cushions and closed my eyes. But even behind my eyelids, I could still feel the moment Luca inhaled the air between us as if he were remembering how to breathe after a decade underwater. I ran, I whispered. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. You are a ghost, Anais murmured. She moved to the window, parted the curtains slightly, then let them fall. And ghosts only stay dead if they are careful. I let out a trembling laugh. I guess I've never been very good at staying dead. Anais returned to me, lowering herself into the armchair across from the sofa. She crossed her legs, smoothed her skirt, and fixed me with a stare that felt like a surgeon preparing to make an incision. What exactly did he say? My heart tightened painfully. He asked me where I got the perfume. In Italian. Anais inhaled slowly. The dialect? Yes. My voice broke. Neapolitan. His dialect. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then he already suspects. Not who I am, I said quickly, sitting up straighter. Just that something is wrong. Something familiar. I don't think he knows who I am yet. But he knows enough to start looking. And Luca de Luca, she said quietly, is very, very good at looking. I swallowed. Hard. I know. The silence stretched for several seconds, tense and suffocating. Then Anais leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You must leave the city tonight. I can't keep running forever, I whispered. You can and you will, she insisted. Because staying means death. Not necessarily at his hands, but in the unraveling of everything you built. You cannot let him get close enough to recognize you. I shook my head. I'm not 19 anymore. I'm not helpless. I don't freeze like I used to. You froze tonight, she said gently. My breath hitched. You froze because you loved him once, she continued. And because he loved the girl you were. But love is a liability you cannot afford. I stared at my trembling hands. Anais, I thought I'd buried all of it. Him. My family. Maples. The fire. I rebuilt an entire life. I made myself from scratch. I shouldn't feel anything. Trauma doesn't leave when you change your name, Arya. The sound of my old name on her lips made me flinch. I looked up sharply. Don't call me that. She softened. Then stop wearing her perfume. I had no answer. Because she was right. Arya Moretti was dead. I had made sure of it. I had walked away from everything she was and everything she loved. Except that one scent I had crafted as a girl who believed in rooftops and secret smiles and a boy who smelled like smoke and sandalwood. A stupid, fragile piece of memory that had just blown my entire world open. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The city lights blurred below us. If I leave tonight, he'll follow. Yes. He will. I turned, startled by the bluntness. So what difference does it make? Anais considered me carefully. The difference is time. Distance. The difference is that you choose where the confrontation happens, not him. You are at a disadvantage here. He has connections, resources, and a reputation that make people open doors. If you flee, you control the battlefield. The battlefield. She said it so easily. Maybe because she'd had her own war once. I dragged my fingers through my hair, frustration clawing through me. I just wanted a life. A normal one. A quiet one. You had one, she said softly. But normal lives are not built on old graves. My throat tightened. So what now? I leave? Disappear again? Become someone else? Not someone else, she said, rising to her feet. Just someone safer. But that was the problem. There was no face safe enough to hide from Luca. Not really. A sudden buzzing startled me. My phone lit up with a notification. Building camera motion detected. Basement level. My stomach twisted. Anise moved next to me and read the screen. Show me the feed. I tapped the notification with trembling fingers. The image loaded slowly, too slowly. And then, two men entered the basement through the service door. Black clothing. Earpieces. Purposeful movement. Not Luca. But close enough. Anise inhaled sharply. They're his. My pulse exploded into a rapid staccato. He found me, I whispered. Already he found me. Anise grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the kitchen. We're not staying here. Get your things. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This was happening too fast, too violently, like a nightmare that had been waiting a decade to wake. Anise pushed a backpack into my hands. Essentials only. 2 minutes. I shoved my passport, wallet, a change of clothes, my phone charger. My heart was beating so loudly I could barely hear the zipper closing. A loud clang echoed through the building, metal against metal. Anise froze, eyes cutting toward the hallway. That was the service stairwell, she whispered. They're inside. My body reacted before my mind did. Where do we go? There's a second exit behind the laundry room, she said, already moving. A maintenance tunnel. You follow it until you see a ladder. Do not stop. Do not look back. What about you? I'll stall them. No. My voice cracked. Anise, if they find you. They want you, she said. Not me. Another loud echo thundered through the hallway. Final. Anise squeezed my hand once, fiercely, like a mother handing her child to fate. Run, Arya. She shoved open the laundry room door. And I ran. The maintenance tunnel swallowed me like a throat, narrow, dark, smelling of damp concrete and rust. My footsteps echoed too loudly, each one ricocheting through the tight passage. I forced myself to breathe, to move, to keep from looking back, even though every instinct screamed to check if they were behind me. Don't look. Don't stop. Don't give fate time to catch you. The dim emergency lights flickered every few feet, thin red glows that barely illuminated the pipes lining the ceiling. Somewhere behind me, distant but closing, I heard muffled footsteps and the faint murmur of men speaking in Italian. Not strangers. Not random intruders. His men. 10 years had passed, but they still moved with the precision of the world I escaped. Quiet, coordinated, deadly. That meant Luca had already started looking, had already sent people, had already suspected. Already too close. Just breathe, I whispered to myself. Just move. The tunnel stretched longer than I remembered. I'd only seen it once when Anise proudly pointed out the building's emergency exits after I moved in. I'd laughed at her then, half joking that she was overestimating the danger of my new life. Now her foresight was the only thing standing between me and the man who once held my heart in his palm like something breakable. A clang echoed far behind me. A door. Opening. Metal against metal. Then a voice. Clear the hall. Check every room. My pulse stopped and then sprinted. Not Luca. His men. The deep cadence. The command. The authority. I picked up speed, my bag bouncing painfully against my side. The tunnel sloped slightly downward before curving to the right. I nearly tripped rounding the corner, catching myself with one hand against the cold concrete. Just keep going. Then I saw it, the ladder. A rusted metal frame bolted into the wall, leading upward to a circular hatch. My breath caught. Distance. I lunged for it, grabbing the bottom rung just as footsteps echoed closer around the bend. They were running now. Not searching and not scanning. Running. I climbed, my palms slipping on rust and sweat. My heart hammered against my ribs hard enough to bruise. I didn't look down. I didn't want to see how close they were. I just climbed, rung after rung, the metal vibrating faintly from movement below. I reached the hatch and pushed. It didn't move. Panic sliced through me. I shoved harder, fingers straining, muscles shaking. The hatch groaned, moved an inch, stopped again. Please. Please. Open. I braced my shoulder against it and heaved upward with every ounce of strength fear had given me. The hatch burst open, cold night air flooding the tunnel like salvation. I scrambled out into the alley, collapsing onto the rough pavement. The air was sharp with winter and the scent of garbage bins and wet asphalt. Above me the sky looked impossibly open, wide enough to breathe again. For a single second I allowed myself to believe I was safe. Then I heard the metal clang of someone grabbing the ladder below. No time. No hesitation. I slammed the hatch shut and ran. The alley was narrow and poorly lit, stretching between two old brick buildings. My boots splashed through shallow puddles as I sprinted toward the street, lungs burning, throat raw. A car sped by at the mouth of the alley, headlights sweeping across the pavement, blinding me for a moment. When the light passed, I was already on the sidewalk, blending into the flow of pedestrians moving toward the transit station a block ahead. People in coats, headphones, backpacks. Normal people, oblivious to the storm that had just torn through my life. My chest heaved. I kept my head down, letting my hair fall forward, obscuring my face. If his men burst onto the street, they wouldn't see Aria Moretti. They would see Elena Rivera. A stranger. A nobody. I forced myself to walk, not run, toward the transit station. Running drew attention. Running meant prey. Walking meant invisible. The station doors opened into a rush of warm, recycled air. People moved in every direction, toward escalators, kiosks, platforms. The noise swallowed me whole, the chaos knitting itself around me like a shield. I stood near a column, pressing a hand to my chest as I struggled to slow my breathing. You made it. You're inside. They can't find you here. But that wasn't true. Not really. If Luca wanted to find me, he would. He always did, even when we were children and I used to hide from him during family gatherings. He'd find me behind curtains, under staircases, in gardens, always smiling like he'd known exactly where I'd be before he even started looking. I hadn't thought about those memories in years. I didn't want to think about them now. I studied the crowd, noting exits, blind spots, and cameras. Old habits. Learned from the world that taught me to stay alive by staying unnoticed. A tall man in a black jacket entered the station. For a split second, adrenaline shot through me, but then he turned his head and I saw his face. Not Luca. Not one of his men. My knees threatened to buckle with relief. I slipped into the stream of commuters heading toward the platforms, letting myself go where the current carried me. Now wasn't the time to plan. Now was the time to vanish. A high-pitched hiss of brakes signaled the arrival of a train. The crowd surged forward. I stepped onto the train just as the doors began to close. My reflection stared back at me in the window, pale, shaken, ghost-like. Breathe, I whispered. The train lurched forward. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't running from the memory of Luca De Luca. I was running from the man himself. The train sped through the darkness of the underground track. Sparks of light flickered through the windows as if the city were whispering warnings I couldn't yet understand. I wrapped my arms around myself and pressed my forehead to the cool glass. Everything inside me trembled, not just from fear but from something far more dangerous. The truth I had spent a decade refusing to acknowledge. Part of me had never stopped loving him. Part of me had never stopped fearing him. And worst of all, part of me had always known that if he ever sensed even a shadow of me in the world, he would come looking. And he had. The train rattled through the underground like a metallic heartbeat, steady and relentless, far more dependable than my own. I stayed pressed against the window until the trembling in my hands eased enough for me to release the breath I'd been holding since the moment I'd seen Luca in that elevator. Luca. Even thinking his name felt dangerous. Like summoning something with teeth. I closed my eyes, but closing them only opened doors I'd spent 10 years barricading shut. Memories rushed in like a flood. Rooftops in Naples lit by crooked street lamps, his voice whispering my name in the dark, his hand shielding me when gunfire erupted 2 floors down, the warmth of his jacket wrapped around my shoulders on cold mornings. And then fire. Screams. The explosion was meant for him. The body they told him was mine. My stomach twisted. I gripped the metal pole beside me, grounding myself. I couldn't afford to drown in the past. Not when the present was already collapsing beneath my feet. The train screeched into a station. Doors slid open. People shuffled in and out, unaware of the girl in the corner of the carriage trying to keep her soul from ripping in half. I needed a plan. Annie's had been right, I had to leave the city. Tonight. But fleeing without thinking was worse than staying. I needed cash, documents and supplies. And I needed to get to my apartment without being followed. A nearly impossible combination. The doors closed again. The train lurched forward. I kept my head down, letting my hair fall across my face. If any of his men had reached the station, they wouldn't be looking for a woman who seemed calm and invisible. Invisibility was survival. I took out my phone but didn't connect to any service. Airplane mode only. Connecting to a network meant traceable signals, cell tower pings and digital footprints. Luca's people could exploit any of those in seconds. I typed a message to myself instead. Return to the apartment? Too risky. Anise might be compromised. Leave the city. How? My thoughts scattered, tripping over each other. I needed something simple. Clean. Direct. The following station announcement chimed overhead, but I barely heard it. I forced myself to list my priorities the way Annie's taught me years ago. Evade immediate pursuit. Secure essentials. Assess travel routes. Disappear. Simple on paper. Bloody impossible in reality. The train slowed again and the doors opened onto a quieter platform. I stepped out, letting the small crowd swallow me before heading for the nearest exit. The night air hit my face like a slap, cold and bracing. I scanned the street automatically. A couple laughing near a taxi stand. A man is pulling down the gate on his corner shop. 3 teenagers are skateboarding down the sidewalk. Normal. Safe enough. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking south. My apartment was 20 minutes away. Too close to return without caution, too far to reach if someone was tailing me. Every few blocks I changed directions. North, west, doubling back. Crossing streets. Waiting at bus stops without getting on. I passed the same street musician twice, pretending not to notice his curious glance. Only when I felt the night settle into something less predatory did I turn toward home. The closer I got, the tighter my chest became. The streetlights glowed against the pavement like puddles of gold. The bakery next door to my building had closed hours ago, metal shutters pulled down. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I stopped across the street, hiding behind a row of parked cars. My apartment windows were dark. No movement inside. The lobby lights glowed faintly. But that didn't mean no one was inside. I waited. A minute. 2. 5. Nothing. I crossed the street cautiously, heart pounding in my throat. My reflection warped in the glass door of my building. Pale, exhausted, frayed at the edges. I keyed in the security code with fingers that barely felt real anymore. The lock clicked. The lobby was empty. My steps echoed softly as I moved toward the stairs. I didn't trust the elevator. Not after tonight. Stairs were safer. Easier to escape from. I climbed 3 flights before stopping at the landing below my floor, listening. Silence. No footsteps. No voices. No movement. Silence wasn't safety. I crept up the last flight, muscles tight, breath shallow. When I reached my door, I paused again, fishing a small compact mirror from my coat pocket. One of the few habits I'd kept from my old life. I slid the mirror under the door and angled it upward. Dark. No shadows are moving. No feet. I exhaled, unlocked the door and slipped inside. My apartment looked untouched. The faint scent of bergamot still lingered from the bottle I'd broken earlier. My books were still aligned by scent category. My coat still hung over the back of the kitchen chair. Everything exactly as I'd left it. Except me. I locked the door behind me and pressed my forehead against it, letting the quiet soak into my bones. My legs shook with delayed adrenaline. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, pressing a hand to my chest. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Long enough for the panic to ebb. Not long enough for the dread to fade. Eventually I stood and moved quickly, methodically, through my apartment. I grabbed my emergency duffel from the closet. Passport. A second unregistered phone. A few days of clothing. A scarf. Comfortable shoes. I hesitated only once, when I reached my dresser. The small glass bottle sat beside my jewelry tray, half filled with pale liquid. My perfume. The perfume he'd recognized. The perfume that had betrayed me tonight. I picked it up, fingers curling around it tightly. The jasmine and fig milk climbed into my nose, soft as memory. I should throw it away. Throw Arya away. Forever. But my hand didn't move. Instead, I whispered to the empty room, "You can't save me anymore." And yet, I tucked the bottle into the duffel anyway. Maybe that was the problem. Perhaps it had always been the problem. A sudden creak shifted the silence. I froze. Not from inside the apartment. From the hallway. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. They stopped right outside my door. My breath hitched painfully. Not again. Not now. Someone exhaled, deep, low, familiar. My blood turned to ice. He was here. The footsteps outside my door didn't continue. They didn't recede. They didn't pace. They stopped. Right there, inches away, separated from me by nothing but wood and a lock that suddenly felt as fragile as paper. A slow exhale followed. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just controlled. Familiar in a way that made my pulse collapse inward. No. Not him. Not here. He couldn't have found me this fast. I pressed my back against the door, willing myself to become invisible, to blend into the shadows of my own apartment. My heartbeat pounded so violently I felt it in my teeth. Don't breathe. Don't move. Don't make a sound. A soft knock. My blood froze. Not the knock of someone searching, someone hunting, someone demanding. No, this one was patient, a quiet, almost courteous knock. As if whoever stood outside already knew I was there. Already knew I was listening. Already knew I wasn't going to answer. A second knock. Still gentle. Still lethal. My lungs burned from holding my breath too long. A tremor crawled up my arms, tightening around my ribs. This couldn't be him. His men maybe yes. But him? No. Luca DeLuca didn't knock. He entered. A shadow passed beneath the doorframe. Someone shifted their weight. I pressed my fingertips to the floor and forced myself to inch. Not stand, not walk, just inch, toward the peephole. I hesitated, then looked. My stomach dropped. Not Luca. Not his men. A neighbor. Mr. Ellis from 3B, the older man with the thick glasses and the sleepy dog who barked at everything except me. But he wasn't wearing his usual knit cardigan and soft smile. He looked pale. Sweating. Eyes darting down the hallway as if something chased him. He leaned toward the peephole slightly, and for a horrifying second, it felt like he could see me through it. "Arya," he whispered. Everything inside me locked. No one here knew that name. I didn't answer. Couldn't. He swallowed hard, voice cracking on the next word. "They're asking questions." My heart slammed painfully against my ribcage. "Two men," he whispered hoarsely. "Black clothing. Strange accents. They were knocking on doors. Asking if we'd seen a woman matching your description." My breath shattered. He didn't know he'd spoken truth, but it landed like a dagger anyway. He leaned closer, voice trembling. "I told them I haven't seen you. But you need to leave. No. Please." A thud sounded at the end of the hall, distant but unmistakable. Mr. Ellis flinched. "I can't stay," he whispered. "I'm sorry." He hurried away, footsteps uneven, fear clinging to him like a wet coat. Another thud. Heavier. A second set of footsteps this time. No hesitation, no fear, no uncertainty. The sound rippled through the hallway with a precision that didn't belong to any ordinary person. My blood ran cold. This time it was him. I backed away from the door, one step, two, then three, until my calves hit the sofa. I grabbed my bag, slinging it over my shoulder as I scanned the room for any escape route I'd missed. Useless. 3 floors down. Fire escape? Only reachable from the hallway or bedroom, both too exposed. Bathroom vent? I'd suffocate before I got 2 feet in. Another step closer outside. My vision tunneled. I felt dizzy, lightheaded. Then I heard his voice. Not raised. Not strained. Just quiet enough for only me to hear. Elena. The name sounded wrong in his mouth, as if he tasted the lie too clearly. "I know you're inside." No breath left my lungs. No thought reached my mind. Just the weight of that voice threading through the air like smoke. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. Pause, short, controlled, intentional. "But I need to speak with you." Panic clawed through my chest. "Don't answer. Don't respond. Don't let him hear you breathe." A second of silence. Then, "I'm going to step back," he murmured, "so you don't feel trapped." I heard his footsteps, slow, measured, moving a few feet away from my door. Not leaving and just giving space. The way a predator backs up to coax prey out of hiding. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing a trembling hand to my mouth to keep any sound from slipping out. He didn't know I was Arya. He couldn't say. He couldn't. If he recognized me, my face, my voice, my soul, I would never escape again. I forced myself to remain still. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then his voice, lower now, carried through the air like a quiet confession. "That perfume," he said. "It belonged to someone I lost." My stomach twisted painfully. "I just need to know why you're wearing it." Another pause. A breath. Barely audible. "I need to know how you knew her." My hands shook so violently I had to sit down before my knees buckled. The sofa dipped beneath me, suffocating me with the memory of a boy who once whispered my name with reverence and tragedy entwined. "Please," he said softly, "open the door. Please." Luca De Luca had never asked anyone for anything. Not gently. Not like this. My heartbeat pounded violently against my ribs, threatening to punch through bone. I couldn't move. I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. I nearly jumped out of my skin when my phone buzzed in my bag. I scrambled to silence it, hands shaking uncontrollably. But it was too late. The soft sound echoed in the silence. His footsteps halted, shifted, turned, and then his shadow reappeared beneath the door. "Elena," he said quietly, "you're not alone in there." I clamped a hand over my mouth to smother the sound of my breathing. Silence. Stillness. A heartbeat. Then the quiet scrape of something sliding against my doorframe. A piece of paper. "I'm not leaving," he murmured. "Not until you talk to me." Footsteps. Retreating this time. Down the hall. But not far enough. I crawled forward, reaching out with trembling fingers to slide the paper under the door. A single line, handwritten with the same precision I remembered. "I won't hurt you. But I will find you." My breath faltered. He was giving me a chance. But also a warning. He was close. Too close. And if I didn't move now, if I didn't escape while he still believed I was someone else, I would lose the anonymity I'd fought so hard to keep. I stood, grabbed my duffel and whispered to the empty room, "You won't find Arya." Then I opened the window, third floor or not, and jumped. The fall wasn't long, but the rush of air felt like a plunge into a void. My stomach lurched as I dropped the 3 floors toward the narrow strip of shrubs lining the building. I tucked my body like Annie's taught me years ago. Arms in, knees bent, chin down, hoping instinct would protect what fear could not. I crashed into the bushes with a muffled thud, branches scraping my arms, dirt filling my mouth. Pain shot through my side, but pain meant I was alive. Pain meant I still had a chance. I rolled out of the shrubs, pulling my duffel after me, and staggered to my feet. My ankle throbbed fiercely, but it held my weight. Good enough. I didn't look up. Didn't dare try to see if the window silhouetted an outline, a shadow, a man leaning out and realizing what direction I'd fled. I ran. The alley behind the building stretched into darkness, lit only by the distant glow of a street lamp flickering like a dying star. I kept to the wall, footsteps quiet, breath shallow. Every sound echoed too loudly, my heartbeat, my ragged inhaling, the distant hum of a car engine. Don't stop. Don't think. Move. I reached the end of the alley and flattened myself against the wall before peeking around the corner. 2 black cars were parked on the street. Engines running. Tinted windows. Dark silhouettes inside. Luca's men. They were waiting, watching the exits. Ready to drag me into the back seat if I stepped into view. I pressed my hand over my pounding heart. He had mobilized them fast. Too fast. That meant he still didn't know who I was. If he did, he wouldn't risk sending men without being here himself. I needed to slip past without drawing their eyes. Above me, the windows of my apartment building loomed in neat rows. I couldn't see which one belonged to mine. Couldn't see if he was still inside, still watching that closed door, still waiting for a woman who no longer existed. I forced my mind back to the street. A delivery truck rattled by on the crossroad ahead. Its headlights carved a brief path of clarity through the night. When it turned, it passed close enough for me to see the company logo sprayed across the side. Food service. Daily route. Same truck every night at this hour. I pushed off the wall and limped down the alley in the opposite direction, toward the back of the neighboring building. My ankles screamed in protest, but I ignored it. The fire escape ladder hung just out of reach. I jumped, fingertips brushing metal. Once. Twice. On the third jump, I caught the rung and pulled it down until it clattered against the pavement. The noise echoed through the alley like a gunshot. I climbed quickly, dragging the ladder up behind me. My duffel smacked against my hip with each rung. Halfway up, voices sounded at the alley entrance. In fondo. At the end, go. I climbed faster, lungs burning. At the first landing, I swung myself over the railing and sprinted across the metal walkway, the grate rattling under my boots. I ducked through a window someone had left cracked open. An old laundry room filled with dusty machines and the faint smell of bleach. Not safe. Not for long. I crossed the room, slipped into the hallway and blended into the residential floor as if I belonged there. My hair was windblown, my coat dirty, but people saw what they expected to see. Just another tenant going out late. I emerged into the building's lobby and exhaled when I saw the empty reception desk. The night guard must have stepped away. For once, luck tilted in my direction. I pushed through the glass doors and stepped onto a quiet sidewalk a block away from my own building. Far enough that if the men watching the street scanned the area, they wouldn't immediately connect this exit to me. I moved quickly down the sidewalk, turning my face away from passing headlights. My ankle throbbed steadily now, a dull burn spreading upward. But stopping wasn't an option. Not here. Not until I vanished deeper into the city's veins. As I rounded the corner, a sudden flash of memory slammed into me so violently that I stumbled. The night I died. The screech of tires. The smell of burning metal. The blast that swallowed sound and color. Then, nothing. Nothing except the fading echo of Luca screaming my name. I braced myself against a lamppost, squeezing my eyes shut until the memory loosened its grip. You survived that. You can survive tonight. When the shaking subsided, I kept walking. A bus rumbled to a stop at the corner, half empty, doors hissing open. On instinct, I climbed aboard and slid into a seat near the back, tucking myself against the window. The bus pulled away from the curb, the city lights smearing into streaks as we moved. I exhaled, long and shaky. I wasn't safe. Not even remotely. But I wasn't caught. Yet. I let the rhythm of the engine settle my nerves as I pressed my forehead to the glass. I watched unfamiliar streets pass by, each one a tiny thread pulling me farther away from the life I'd failed to protect. I reached into my coat pocket, retrieving the folded paper Luca had slipped under my door. I shouldn't have kept it. But my fingers unfolded it anyway. I won't hurt you. But I will find you. A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. Not because of fear. But because the Luca in that message wasn't the ruthless man I'd imagined tonight. It was the boy I once trusted with pieces of myself I would never reclaim. Dangerous. Steady. Unyielding. A boy who would burn down the world to protect someone he loved. I crumpled the note in my fist. He wasn't looking for Arya. He was looking for the woman who smelled like her. And the moment he learned the truth, the moment he understood who I really was, he would never let me disappear again. I closed my eyes and whispered into the hum of the city, "You can try, Luca. But I won't let you find me." But a part of me, a part one hated, whispered back, "He already has." The bus rattled over a pothole, jolting me hard enough that my teeth clicked. The city outside blurred into neon streaks and dark storefront windows. I tightened my grip on the duffel bag in my lap, every muscle in my body wound too tightly to relax. I didn't have a destination. I just needed movement. Distance. Noise. Enough to drown out the sensation of being hunted. Sitting still felt like an invitation, like opening a door and whispering for Luca to walk through it. I curled my knees slightly inward, keeping my profile low. People around me mindlessly scrolled their phones, listened to music, stared into the void the way exhausted city dwellers do. No one noticed me. No one looked twice. Good. As long as I was nobody, I was safe. The bus slowed at the next stop. A few passengers stepped off. A few climbed on, their faces ghostly under the harsh fluorescent lights. I kept my eyes down, but then a man's footsteps approached the back, steady and deliberate. My pulse jumped. I didn't turn. Didn't lift my head. Instead, I watched the reflection in the window, the faint silhouette of someone taking the seat 2 rows behind me. A large build. Dark coat. My fingers dug into the fabric of my duffel. Not him. Not him. Please, not him. The man settled in, pulling a phone from his pocket. The faint glow illuminated a face that wasn't Luca's. Not even close. I let out a tiny breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. You're paranoid. But paranoia was survival now. The bus continued deeper into the city, passing rows of closed restaurants and high-rise apartments, crossing under bridges where the shadows felt thick enough to swallow everything. I pulled out the unregistered phone Anise insisted I keep. I powered it on but didn't activate the data. I needed to stay dark, untraceable. I opened the offline notes app. Supplies, new phone, VPN card, hair dye, new ID, cash, burner clothes, train ticket under alias. I stared at the list, my vision blurring. I'd done this before, too many times. And yet this felt different. This felt like I was running from a part of myself. The bus turned onto one of the main streets leading toward downtown. My stomach twisted when I recognized it. This route passed close to the waterfront, the same place where I'd first set foot in this city 10 years ago, exhausted and raw, carrying nothing but a single backpack, a forged passport, and the unbroken instinct to survive. It was the night Anise found me, collapsed on a bench, shivering, barely able to speak English. She had approached me gently, asked nothing, and offered help with a softness I'd never known. I owed her my life. And now she might be in danger because of me. I swallowed hard, pressing the back of my head into the seat. No matter what happens next, I whispered, I will not let Luca's men find her. She had protected me out of kindness, and kindness was a currency the world I came from rarely traded in. The bus slowed again, this time near a station entrance that led to the interstate rail line. Opportunity. I stood quickly as the doors hissed open. A few passengers shuffled out with me. I kept my head down, moving fast but not frantic, blending with the crowd heading underground. Once inside the station, the air shifted, warmer, humming with activity. People dragged suitcases, carried duffel bags, and rushed for departing trains. Departure boards flickered overhead with places I could disappear into. Port Clark, Redwater City, North Point, Blue Valley. Names of cities big enough to hide in. My breath steadied slightly. Maybe I could find a way out before he tightened his net. I approached a kiosk, head lowered so the cameras caught only the top of my hair. I purchased a one-way paper ticket from a cash-only machine. A ticket to a small transfer station 2 hours away. From there, I could change routes without a digital trail. The machine spat out the ticket. I slid it into my coat pocket and turned. And froze. The sound cut through the station noise like a razor edge. The rhythmic tap of expensive shoes. Measured. Confident. Unhurried. I didn't have to turn to know it didn't belong to a commuter. Or a student. Or a traveler. Luca always walked like the ground obeyed him. Ice flooded my veins. Well, he couldn't have found me this quickly. It had only been minutes. Impossible. But instinct didn't care about time. Instinct cared about danger. I ducked behind a pillar, planting my back against the cold surface. My heart raced so hard I thought it would bruise the inside of my ribs. I tilted my head enough to catch a reflection in the polished tile floor across the hall. Dark coat. Broad shoulders. Not close enough for me to identify him. Too close for comfort. I swallowed my panic and slipped into the flow of bodies heading toward the lower platforms. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The weight of that presence pressed into my spine. If it wasn't him, it was one of his. If it was him, I would never outrun him again. Descending the escalator, I kept my eyes down, watching shoes rather than faces. The platform at the bottom stretched wide, lit with flickering overhead bulbs. A train waited, doors open. Passengers boarded with the sleepy sluggishness of late-night travel. I stepped forward. My ankle throbbed sharply beneath my weight, a reminder that I wasn't whole. I ignored it and moved faster, weaving through a family with strollers, 2 businessmen, and a woman feeding coins into a vending machine. You're an expert at becoming invisible. Until a familiar scent washed over me. Sandalwood. Clean. My body reacted before thought had a chance. My breath shortened, my vision blurred briefly with fear thick enough to swallow language. But the scent was faint. Lingering. Not directly behind me. From his coat? From someone he passed? From the air currents that still carried the memory of him from earlier? I spun just a fraction, and caught sight of a man in a dark coat at the far end of the platform. Facing away. Phone to his ear. So focused. Not Luca. Too tall. Too rigid in posture. Relief punched out of me so violently that I leaned against a column to steady myself. But relief was fragile. Because if I couldn't tell from a distance who he was and who wasn't, then the danger was worse than I thought. The train's departure tone chimed. I boarded quickly, slipped into a seat near the rear door and kept my bag on my lap. When the doors began to close, I let myself glance once more toward the platform. The man on the phone hadn't moved. But someone else had. Another figure stepping out from behind a vending machine, gazes sweeping the platform like a hawk searching for prey. Dark eyes. Calculating. Not Luca. One of his men. One I recognized. My stomach twisted painfully. He scanned the platform, brow furrowed as if sensing something just beyond his reach. His head turned, slowly, toward my train. Our gazes nearly met. The doors slid shut. The train lurched forward. I sank into my seat and whispered to the trembling inside my chest, "You're running out of time." As I was. And Luca was no longer behind me. He was closing in. The train hummed beneath me, metal grinding softly against metal as it pulled away from the station. I pressed a trembling hand against the window, the city lights flickering past like fireflies caught in a storm. My breath fogged the glass in faint circles, fading almost as quickly as they appeared. Behind me, somewhere on that platform, one of Luca's men had paused, eyes narrowing, shoulders tensing, instincts sharpening. Hunters recognized a disturbance in the air, even when they couldn't see prey. But I was no longer prey. I kept telling myself that. I shifted in my seat, pulling my duffel tightly against me. The train car wasn't crowded, but the stillness of the few passengers felt suffocating. An older woman dozed near the front. A teenage couple whispered to each other by the opposite window. A man in paint-stained clothes stared blankly at his phone. Normal. Safe. Ordinary. The exact kind of environment I needed to vanish into. But my heart wouldn't stop pounding against my ribs, each beat hammering out a truth I didn't want to face. He was close. Closer than he'd been in 10 years. Close enough that the air still tasted faintly of sandalwood whenever I let my guard slip. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. Focus. Regroup. Plan. You can't outrun him if you don't know where you're going. I reached into my duffel and pulled out a compact leather-bound notebook, one of the few things I'd kept from my early years in this new life. My handwriting was a mixture of old and new identities, scribbled across pages spanning a decade of running. I flipped to a blank page. Options. Redwater. Too industrial. Too many cameras. North Point. Too small. Hard to hide. Blue Valley. Slower to track trails. Good start, Port Clark. Too close to the docks. Too familiar. I tapped the pen against the paper. Blue Valley. Quiet. Forgettable. A place where no one looked twice at strangers. The train I'd boarded would take me halfway there. I'd need to transfer once, but I could handle that. I'd handled far worse. The train lights flickered as we sped into a long, dark tunnel. In the reflection on the window, my own eyes stared back. Wide, haunted, a version of myself I hadn't seen since the night I died. A shiver ran through me at the memory. Flames licking at the windshield. The seatbelt is refusing to release. The roar of the blast. The weight of someone screaming my name. I forced the memory away with a violent shake of my head. Not now. Not here. Not when darkness threatened to swallow reason whole. The tunnel opened again, spilling the train onto an elevated track. City blocks stretched out below like pieces of a broken mosaic. A billboard flashed advertisements across the skyline. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed. My eyes drifted to the reflection again. This time not at myself but at the rows of seats behind me. Everyone looked normal. Every face is still. Every posture is relaxed. 2 rows back. A man. Head bowed. Hands clasped. Hood pulled low over his forehead. Not unusual. Half the city dressed like that. But something about him clawed at my instincts. Maybe it was the tension in his shoulders. Perhaps it was the way he sat too still. Maybe it was the faint tremor he tried to conceal when the train bumped over uneven tracks. Or maybe it was the brief glint of metal tucked beneath his jacket. A communication earpiece. My blood turned to ice. I didn't move. Didn't shift. Didn't let my breath change cadence. I lowered my gaze to my notebook, pretending to write while every nerve in my body vibrated with warning. Here. Not Luca. But his eyes. His ears. His shadow. The hunter sent ahead to flush out whatever quarry Luca wanted. He hadn't looked up. Not yet. If he saw my face, my new one, he wouldn't connect it to me. But if he caught my scent, my stomach twisted. The perfume. The one thread that could kill everything. I needed to get rid of it. It had been my downfall once. I glanced at my bag. The bottle was tucked in the side pocket, wrapped in a scarf. I could shatter it right here. Pour it down the bathroom sink. Throw it out the window. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. It wasn't logical. Not survival. Just a weakness I hated myself for. The train slowed as we approached the next station. A mechanical voice announced it overhead. The man 2 rows back shifted, lifting his chin slightly. I didn't wait. The moment the train hissed to a stop, I stood, slipped into the aisle and disappeared into the stream of exiting passengers. The platform air rushed around me, smelling like concrete and electricity. Don't run. Don't draw attention. But the man with the hood stood as well. A jolt of fear shot through me. He wasn't getting off by chance. He was following. My walking quickened to a steady, sharp rhythm. I headed for the far end of the platform where a set of stairs led down to another line. A line in the opposite direction of where I needed to go. Sacrifice the plan. Save the life. I descended quickly, boots clacking softly on the steps. At the bottom, I merged with another cluster of travelers. The platform smelled faintly of burnt rubber and cheap coffee. I didn't look back. A train screeched to a halt on this lower track. Doors slid open. A woman with a stroller stepped out. Someone dropped a bag. A man argued loudly with a vending machine. I stepped in with the crowd. And then froze. A flicker of movement caught my eye, on the opposite side of the train. He stepped into view. Not the hooded man. Someone else. Someone too familiar. Someone unmistakable. His profile struck me like a physical blow. Strong jaw. Dark stubble. Eyes that scanned the platform with slow, predatory precision. Luca. My breath caught painfully in my throat. He shouldn't be here. He shouldn't have gotten here this fast. This was impossible. But Luca De Luca had never lived within the limits of the possible. The platform blurred. My knees nearly buckled. And for a heartbeat, a dangerous, fragile heartbeat, his gaze flicked toward me. No recognition. Not yet. But something pulled his attention. The faint scent of jasmine and fig milk drifted through the open train doors. Me. I reacted on instinct. The doors began to close. And I stepped back out of the train, disappearing behind a column just as the train pulled away. His head snapped toward the movement. Bo. His gaze sharpened. His footsteps started. He was coming. Not his men. Not his hunters. Him. I didn't have time to think. Instinct took over. Or maybe it was terror or muscle memory carved from a lifetime of running. All I knew was that the moment Luca stepped toward me, Something primal detonated in my chest. I pivoted sharply and slipped behind the column, my footsteps muffled by the rubber flooring. The station's noise swelled around me. PA announcements, rolling luggage wheels, the distant grind of another arriving train. But beneath it all I could hear him. Luca didn't walk like other people. He didn't rush. He didn't stomp. His steps were deliberate. Calculated. A predator was confident in his certainty that he would catch whatever he was hunting. I kept my body tight against the cold cement pillar, forcing myself to breathe evenly as the air thinned and my pulse surged. Don't panic. Don't freeze. Don't. A shadow slid across the floor. My breath hitched. He was close. Too close. Just one wrong movement, one wrong breath, and he'd see me. And once Luca saw something, truly saw it, he never forgot. I edged along the pillar, inch by careful inch, until I could slip behind a group of travelers crowding around a malfunctioning ticket machine. Their arguing voices blended into a perfect screen. I moved just as Luca stepped into view of where I'd been seconds earlier. His gaze swept the platform in sharp arcs, left, right, down the stairs toward the far tunnel entrance. Searching, assessing, zeroing in on disturbances like a man who'd spent his entire life reading danger in shadows. And then, he inhaled. Subtle. Barely noticeable. But I noticed. A small, almost imperceptible flicker of recognition crossed his face. Not knowing, just sensing. As if the air itself had whispered something familiar to him. My fragrance. The mistake I kept making. The part of Arya I refused to kill. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. A train rolled into the platform behind me, its brakes hissing loudly. People surged forward. The crowd tightened. Chaos. Noise. Perfect. I slipped into the wave of bodies boarding the train on my side of the platform. I didn't look back. Not until I stepped through the doors and turned sideways, pretending to adjust my bag strap. Through the shrinking gap between the train doors I saw him. Luca stood at the center of the station, head lifted slightly as if tracking the faintest trace of something that shouldn't exist. His eyes narrowed, not in anger but in that deep, unsettling way he'd always had when reading a puzzle. And then, his gaze snapped toward my train. The doors sealed shut. Our eyes didn't meet, not truly, not directly. But something in my chest tightened painfully, as if a wire stretched between us was pulling taut. Bo. I stepped back from the doors, heart hammering. The train lurched forward, pulling me away from him, away from danger. Away from everything I had ever wanted and could never have again. I dropped into an empty seat, clutching my duffel, feeling every beat of my pulse like a bruise under my skin. I needed to disappear further. Faster. Smarter. But the world inside my head was spinning too violently to think. Luca's eyes, those ocean-deep, storm-shadowed eyes, had flicked in my direction like he felt the ghost of a memory brushing his skin. He didn't know it was me. Not yet. But the intuition that made him feared in every underworld circle on the continent was awakening. And once Luca's instincts woke, they didn't sleep again. The train rolled through station after station, each one pulling me farther from the city center. I stared out the window, trying to steady my breathing, forcing myself to think. He had found my building. He had spoken to my neighbors. He had knocked on my door. Which meant, no, I whispered before the thought even finished forming. But the shrinking space inside my chest told me I already knew the truth. He knew my scent. He knew my movements. He knew my lies. He didn't know my face. He didn't know my voice. He didn't know my name. But he wasn't looking for Elena Rivera anymore. He was looking for the woman who smelled like Arya Moretti. And I was the only one in the world who did. The train slowed at another transfer station. People shuffled off. Others boarded. I stayed seated, forcing myself to appear calm, normal, unremarkable. But when the doors opened, cold air swept through the car, and something in my spine stiffened. A shift in the atmosphere. A tension in the doorway. A presence stepping onto the train that didn't belong to a weary traveler. Not him, but one of his. The hooded man from earlier. He strolled down the aisle, scanning faces, looking for a woman alone with a duffel bag, someone who moved like prey. I bent over my notebook, pretending to write, hair falling like a curtain across my face. My pulse roared. The man reached my row, paused, looked directly at me. My blood froze. I didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't lift my head. But then, someone behind him bumped into him, muttering an apology. He glanced over his shoulder, distracted for a fraction of a second. I slipped out of my seat in that instant, moving quickly but quietly toward the back exit of the car. The final door slid open into the connector between train cars. The cold air bit at my skin. The metal grated beneath my boots. I stepped into the next car. A woman holding a baby glanced up briefly before returning to her phone. A man reading a newspaper didn't even look at me. Perfect. I took a seat near the far corner, back against the wall, eyes on the aisle. The hooded man continued forward, still scanning the previous car. He hadn't noticed. Yet. My lungs burned from holding breath after breath in fear-soaked bursts. I closed my eyes for a second, forehead resting against the cool window. You can't keep doing this. Running in circles. Evading ghosts and men with teeth. Living between lies and half-truths. One day something would catch me, whether it was Luca or the past or the version of myself I kept trying to bury. But not tonight. The train sped forward again, carrying me deeper into the night, farther from the life I'd built, and closer to whatever fate was waiting beyond the next station. I let out a slow, controlled breath. "You won't catch me," I whispered. But the truth pushed back, soft and undeniable. He always catches what he hunts. The train's rhythm changed. I felt it before I heard it. A subtle shift in momentum, a loosening of the rails, a widening of the track. We were leaving the city's heart now, moving toward the outskirts where the buildings thinned and the darkness thickened. I pressed my forehead to the window, watching the urban sprawl dissolve into scattered lights and shadowy warehouses. The night sky stretched wider here, no longer smothered by skyscrapers. For the first time since I'd run, I felt a strange, fragile breath of possibility. Maybe I can get ahead of him. Just this once. Just long enough to vanish again. My reflection in the glass looked hollow. My eyes were sharp, wide, flickering with adrenaline I couldn't kill. The faint crook of my mouth looked like I was holding myself together with threads. The hooded man from earlier was gone, lost somewhere back in the maze of train cars. I'd slipped through one transition too smoothly, vanished 1 second too quickly. He was trained, yes, but not like Luca. No one was like Luca. The thought made my stomach twist. I dragged the sleeve of my coat across my mouth, wiping away the cold sheen of sweat clinging to my lip. The intercom crackled overhead. Next station, Eastbound Junction. Transfer available to regional lines. My muscles tightened. Eastbound Junction meant choices. Choices meant escape. Escape meant survival. I gathered my bag, pulling the strap across my chest so it wouldn't slip during a fast exit. The doors hissed open with a cold burst of air as the train rolled to a stop. Passengers shuffled out and I merged into their flow, head lowered, letting coats and backpacks form a shield around me. The station was large. Too large. Too many people. Too many eyes. I scanned every face without appearing to do so. I listened for heavy footsteps, a steady rhythm, a familiar cadence that belonged to a man who moved like controlled violence made flesh. Nothing. Not yet. Eastbound Junction's main hall stretched before me, glass roof towering overhead, signs blinking with departure times, vendors closing up for the night. The scent of old coffee, metal, and cold tile hit me like a nostalgic punch. 10 years ago I'd walked through a station not unlike this one with a different name, a different face, a different heartbeat. I'd been terrified then too, but differently, shattered, bleeding, half alive. Now I was terrified because I was alive. Because living meant being hunted. I moved quickly toward the regional line kiosks, careful not to angle my face toward any of the overhead cameras. I found a machine tucked between two broken vending machines. Perfect. Low visibility. As I approached, a flicker of movement reflected in the kiosk screen. Someone walking behind me. My pulse spiked. Don't look. Don't turn. Don't. The man walked past. Not Luca. Not his. Just a stranger with an overstuffed backpack and tired eyes. I exhaled silently. The machine's touchscreen glowed to life. I selected the route to Blue Valley, paid in cash, snatched the ticket and slipped it into my coat. Departure, 9 minutes. Enough time to stay ahead. I stepped away and froze mid-stride. A scent drifted through the air. Sandalwood. Darker than earlier. Sharper. More deliberate. My heart stopped. He was here. I didn't turn my head. Not even a fraction. I didn't need to. My body recognized him before my mind did. It was the way the air seemed to contract around him, the way footsteps subtly slowed when people noticed him without understanding why. Luca didn't need to announce himself. He existed loudly enough. I slipped behind a pillar, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my bag. The scent wasn't strong enough to mark the exact location, but it was close, too close. Close enough that panic crackled under my skin like electricity searching for an escape route. Think. Move. Survive. I edged along the pillar, scanning the hall through momentary reflections, glass cases, vending machine doors, the polished floor. Each one gave me fragments. A blur of a dark coat. Broad shoulders. A silhouette that carried too much weight in the space around it. He was moving toward the central hall. Not searching unthinkingly. Tracking. His instincts were awake now, sharp, honed, hungry. And my scent was still clinging to me like a confession. I forced myself into the flow of people heading for the far stairwell. If I didn't break line of sight, if he even glimpsed the shape of my shoulders the way I moved, he would know. Not consciously, maybe. Not logically. But deep in his bones. Deep in the place where he kept all his ghosts. My feet carried me faster, weaving through bodies, past a family wrangling their luggage, past a man selling discount train pillows, past a woman arguing with her partner over directions. Cass was my cover. At the top of the stairwell I glanced down, just once, to be sure he wasn't behind me. He wasn't. But 2 of his men were. Descending from the opposite escalator, splitting formation, eyes sweeping the crowd with the calm efficiency of soldiers. My breath came out in a tremor. He brought more. Not 1 hunter. Not 2. And if the team was here, he wasn't far behind. I bolted down the stairs, pulse thunderous, ignoring the pain shooting through my ankle. Every step felt like a countdown. My vision blurred. My lungs burned. But survival sang louder. At the bottom I cut sharply right, slipping behind a line of vending machines and into a narrow maintenance corridor marked staff only. Broken lock. Open door. Dark passage. Hope. I ducked inside, letting the shadows swallow me. The hum of the station faded behind me, replaced by the distant sound of footsteps above. I leaned against the wall, trembling, hands shaking so violently I could barely keep hold of my bag. "You're close," he had written. "You won't escape me." He wasn't wrong. But he wasn't right either. I pushed myself off the wall and moved deeper into the maintenance corridor, guided only by the faint glow of emergency lights. The corridor opened into a secondary platform, unused, abandoned, forgotten. A lone train sat in shadow, doors open for cleaning. No staff in sight. No cameras. Just a single opportunity carved out by fate or luck or desperation. I stepped inside. The train smelled of dust and stale air. Not jasmine. Not fig milk. Not sandalwood. For the first time in hours I breathed without flinching. I chose a seat in the far corner of the empty car. My hands still trembled, but less now. Enough that I could steady them in my lap and whisper to the silence. "I wasn't supposed to see you again." But the silence whispered back a truth I didn't want to admit. Luca was this close now. He wasn't chasing me anymore. He was catching up. I didn't know how long I sat there in the dim, abandoned train car. Minutes, hours, years. Time didn't move normally when fear wrapped itself around your ribs. It pressed in tight, squeezing until you weren't sure whether the ache in your chest was panic or simply the echo of a heartbeat that had forgotten how to be steady. The silence felt underwater thick, the kind that swallowed sound instead of carrying it. I tried to breathe deeply, but every inhale was shallow, careful, as if the darkness might shatter if I disturbed it too loudly. The overhead lights flickered once. I flinched. Then silence. Then stillness again. I wasn't safe here. Not really. The quiet might have protected me for the moment, but the quiet had never held Luca back before. If he knew this station had old maintenance platforms, and he'd reach this place the way fire reaches dry wood. Inevitable, unstoppable, consuming everything in its path. I needed to move. My ankles screamed when I stood, the pain sharp enough to make my vision go white at the edges. I grabbed the nearest pole, forcing breath back into my lungs. Pain was good. Pain meant I still had choices. Pain meant I wasn't caught yet. The train doors were still open. Beyond them, the empty platform waited in heavy silence. One step. Then another. The station's stale air pressed against my skin as I stepped out, senses flaring. Every whisper of sound felt magnified. The drip of a leaky pipe, the scuttle of a rat near the tracks, the distant hum of electricity in old wires. But no footsteps. No voices. No scent of sandalwood. Good. The maintenance corridor stretched ahead like a throat waiting to swallow me whole. I clutched my bag tighter and forced my feet to move. The corridor wound upward, branching into dark offshoots that led deeper under the city. I stayed on the main path, trusting the emergency lights to guide me. Eventually, the corridor ended at a rusted metal door. I pushed it open. Cold night air slammed into me, stealing my breath. I stumbled onto a deserted service road behind the station, where the city skyline cut jagged silhouettes against the sky. No taxis. No pedestrians. Just dark asphalt and the faint hum of distant traffic. For a moment, relief washed through me, cool, clean, dangerous relief. I'd made it out. I could leave. I could disappear. I could choose freedom again. I took one step forward. Then I stopped. Something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Like the city was holding its breath. A soft crunch sounded behind me. Not loud. But unmistakable. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Measured. My heartbeat plummeted into my stomach. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. Every muscle locked, frozen in that moment between instinct and terror. The air shifted, like the world itself leaned toward something inevitable. And then, Arya. My name. Spoken softly. Not with anger. Not with triumph. But with something far more dangerous. Recognition. The syllables slid through the air and wrapped themselves around my spine, chilling me to the core. I closed my eyes. He knew. Not the scent. Not the ghost. Not the memory. Me. Slowly, too slowly, I turned. He stood several feet away, framed by the rusted door I'd just walked through. The dim station lights spilled down in fractured lines across his face, carving shadows and angles I remembered far too well. Older. Colder. But unmistakably him. Luca. His eyes found mine instantly, like they had been searching for 10 years and finally locked onto their target. A storm lived behind them. Not rage. Not relief. Something deeper. Something carved from grief and disbelief and a decade of unanswered questions. My throat constricted. He took a step toward me. I took one back. He stopped. Don't run, he said quietly. Not now. Not from me. A laugh escaped me, thin cracked. What else would I do? His jaw tightened. You think I mean to hurt you? I don't think, I whispered. I know. His gaze softened for the tiniest fraction of a second, so small I would have missed it if I weren't watching him like he was the edge of a cliff. I searched the world for you, he murmured. You weren't supposed to find me. He stepped closer. My pulse spiked. I didn't retreat this time, though every survival instinct screamed at me to run. You changed everything, he said softly. Your face. Your name. Your life. I had to. His voice dropped even lower. Then why didn't you change the one thing you knew I'd recognize? A breath hitched in my throat. I didn't think. You didn't want to, he finished, gaze burning into mine. That scent, it was the thread you left behind. I shook my head, a tear slipping down my cheek. It was the only piece of me I could keep. A long silence stretched between us, alive and fragile. Then Luca moved. Not fast, not threatening, just one slow step forward, closing the distance to mere inches. He lifted a hand, hesitated, then touched my cheek with a gentleness so unexpected it stole the breath from my lungs. 10 years, he whispered. And you still smell like home. Another tear fell. I'm not your home, I whispered. His thumb brushed my skin. You always were. I closed my eyes, the truth breaking me open like light through a crack. I can't go back, I breathed. I'm not asking you to go back, he said. I'm asking you to stop running. I opened my eyes, swallowing the tremor in my chest. Luca. He inhaled deeply the way he had at the gala, the way he had when something buried in his soul awakened. I found you once, he murmured. I won't lose you again. I exhaled a trembling breath, stepping back, not rejecting him, just anchoring myself. We can't stay here, I whispered. He nodded once, slowly. No, he agreed. But we leave together. The night pressed close around us. Hunted. Haunted. Found. And for the first time in 10 years. I didn't run. The safe house Luca brought me to wasn't really a safe house. It was a quiet villa on the edge of the city. Woods thick enough to hide secrets. Windows wide enough to let the dawn touch every surface in gold. Not grand. Not intimidating. Not the fortress I expected. If anything, it felt like a place built for someone who wanted to be alone with their ghosts. Maybe that was why he brought me here. Morning light slipped through the curtains, brushing across my skin. I sat on the edge of the bed, knees drawn up, heartbeat steady for the first time in hours. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through the air. Not jasmine. Not fig milk. Not sandalwood. Just quiet. Just peace. For the first time in 10 years I wasn't hiding. I wasn't reinventing myself. I wasn't running from the shadow of a man whose presence used to consume entire rooms. I was sitting in a home I was never supposed to see again, breathing the same air as the boy I once loved and the man he'd become. Soft footsteps sounded in the hall. My pulse responded before logic did. Familiar, instinctive, uncontrollable. He appeared in the doorway, leaning one shoulder against the frame as if he'd been there for hours. He looked different now. Or maybe he just looked honest. No mask. No distance. No command in his posture. Just Luca. He held 2 mugs. You're awake, he said, voice low, rough with sleep. I thought you left. I did, he murmured, stepping into the room. To make sure we weren't followed. And to make coffee. Both seem equally necessary this morning. He handed me a mug. Our fingers brushed. 1,000 memories tightened in the space between that touch. Thank you, I said softly. His gaze lingered. I didn't think I'd ever hear your voice again. I looked down at the mug. I wasn't supposed to speak to you again. A faint smile touched his mouth, but only for a heartbeat. Yet here we are. Here we were. Alive. Together. In a reality that shouldn't have existed. He sat beside me. Not too close. Not far. Just enough that I could feel the heat of him, steady and grounding. Arya. My name sounded different now. Less like a wound. More like a beginning. You don't have to explain everything today, he said quietly. Or tomorrow. Or ever if you don't want to. I looked at him, startled. I spent years asking questions to air, he continued. Years hunting for pieces of truth that didn't want to be found. I'm not going to chase you the way I used to chase ghosts. His eyes met mine. But I will stay. For as long as you let me. The air between us shifted. My throat tightened with words I wasn't ready to give. You always found me, I whispered. He exhaled slowly. Not this time. Pause. You came out on your own. A tear slid down my cheek. Quiet, uninvited. I wiped it quickly, but Luca's hand caught my wrist. Don't hide from me anymore, he said gently. Not like that. I swallowed hard. I don't know how to stop running. His thumb brushed the inside of my wrist. Then run with me. My breath stuttered. Run with him. Not from him. Not from my past. Not from the girl I'd been forced to bury. Run toward something. I can't promise I'll stay, I whispered. I don't know if I can. You don't have to promise. He leaned closer, forehead nearly touching mine. Just don't disappear without saying goodbye. My chest cracked open. I can do that, I breathed. For the first time in 10 years he smiled. Small, real, breaking through the stoic armor he wore like a second skin. I can work with that, he murmured. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It wasn't full of fear or grief or the ghosts that chased us across a decade of lost time. It was warm, fragile, alive. He stood, offering his hand. Come downstairs. It's something. We'll figure out the rest after. The rest. The future neither of us had dared to imagine. I took his hand. Not because I trusted fate. Not because the danger was gone. Not because the past had healed. I took it because, for the first time since the night I died, I wanted to. And as Luca led me out of the room, sunlight warming our backs, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe. I wasn't running anymore. Not from him. Not from the truth. Not from myself. For the first time in 10 years. I was walking towards something. Towards someone.